Yeah, and that was going to be my next question is kind of explaining how this seven mountain prophecy or mandate fits in. And how does this go back to biblical? Because I mean, being raised in my background with so many evangelical Protestants as friends, I grew up Catholic. It's always about rooted in biblical principles and rooted in the Bible. Is this stuff in the Bible?
It's a good question. It doesn't come from the Bible, though people have definitely tried to read it into the Bible. Yes, for most evangelicals, the Bible is the touchstone for everything that they believe and practice. For charismatic evangelicals, they would add in experience and prophecy to that mix. Not that they would say that experience or prophecy trumps the Bible per se, but that the meaning of the Bible and the meaning of the biblical message is amplified or clarified through experiences and prophecy. So the Seven Mountains, it has deep roots that in some ways go back to John Calvin and this idea that there are different spheres of authority in society. So there's a government sphere, there's a religion sphere, there's a home sphere, and each of those have kind of their own modes of authority that operate distinctly in society. And over time, that idea was picked up by other Calvinist theologians, and especially a guy named Abraham Kuyper in the Netherlands, who used the phrase sphere sovereignty to describe these different spheres of life, and they each have a form of sovereignty, right? God delegates to the government to rule over the kind of political realm, delegates to the church to rule over the religion realm, that sort of thing. And then in the 1960s, 1970s, a group of sort of hyper-Calvinist theologians called the Reconstructionists, centered around a guy named R.J. Rushdoony, really took these ideas and ran with them in a very aggressive way. They started really trying to hammer this stuff out. And that's the context in which a couple of guys who were kind of influenced by these Reconstructionist ideas, they were both very prominent evangelical leaders named Loren Cunningham and Bill Bright. Loren Cunningham founded Youth with a Mission, which everyone just calls YWAM. Bill Bright founded Campus Crusade for Christ. And they were acquaintances, and they were getting together for dinner in Colorado in 1975, and they claimed that they both had dreams the night before they had dinner, where God revealed to them these what they called seven spheres of authority, or seven mind molders of culture, kind of building off of the kind of Kuyperian idea, the Calvinist idea, but they're specifying and saying, well, no, there are these seven arenas of society, and they're claiming that it's coming through this kind of divine revelation to them. And that idea kind of kicked around seven spheres of authority or seven mind molders of culture, but it wasn't. I mean, it was taught in YWAM, taught in different circles, but it was not that popular. And then in the year 2000, Loren Cunningham, the guy who had founded YWAM, meets Lance Wallnau, this kind of washed up Rhode Island charismatic pastor, at a conference, tells him about these dreams, tells him about this idea. And Wallnau, who had been kind of searching for what to do next, he was kind of trying his hand at motivational speaking because being a pastor wasn't working out so well for him. And he latches onto this idea, and he claimed that he had also heard another idea, a near-death experience that somebody had. And he'd heard the story of this guy's vision of these seven mountains coming out of the ocean. And God speaks to him and says, that's the government mountain, and you're supposed to go to the government mountain and take it over. And so Wallnau blends these things together. So he takes the seven spheres idea, slaps on the imagery of mountains, and he says, this is the seven mountain mandate. This is what Christians are supposed to be doing. So it's kind of these, none of this is rooted directly in the text of the Bible. You got the kind of layer of Calvinist theology, and then two layers of like prophecy on top of that. And that's the idea that Wallnau kind of presents. So it's kind of in some ways a simplified form of these Reconstructionist ideas. But then Wallnau, by adding in this mountain imagery, is saying, right, a sphere of authority is non-directional, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're like, I am called by God to go and influence the government sphere, like, okay, how do you influence a sphere of influence, right? Well, you just go into it and just be there, right? Like it's not about conquering a sphere. It's just about kind of being present. So like I think Cunningham and Bright's idea was like Christians need to go into more parts of society and not only segregate themselves in the church. But then Wall now comes along and adds in this mountain imagery, and then that imagery, that the Seven Mountains concept, gets picked up by these NAR networks and just broadcast all over the place. And today, I mean, more than 50% of evangelicals will say they agree with the Seven Mountains idea. Wow. That originated like 25 years ago, right? It's not an old idea. But the Seven Mountains concept is directional, right? There's a top of the mountains. And if you want to control the mountain, you have to control the top of the mountain. And so Wallnow and then Peter Wagner, as he picks up these ideas, they really play into that and start saying, well, we're doing spiritual warfare and real world warfare to conquer the Seven Mountains. And it's a scalable model, right? So the Seven Mountains can exist in a city and in a state and in a nation. And they would say the Seven Mountains are there in every society. And so the idea that, as Wallnow and Wagner kind of really formulated, is the tops of these mountains in every society, in every city, are either controlled by Satan and his minions or by the church and Christians. And so Christians need to conquer the tops of all seven mountains so that Christian influence will flow down the rest of society. And it's a very pragmatic kind of framework, right? Like it's really like figure out what your mountain is, figure out what mountain you're called to or what your career is directed, and try to conquer that mountain or support other people who are conquering that mountain. And this becomes very, very popular in this independent charismatic world. It also becomes part of the core rationale for why a lot of evangelicals wind up supporting Donald Trump, because they say he's not a good Christian, but he can conquer the government mountain for us. And Wagner, when he endorses Trump in February of 2016, actually uses that. Wallnow was one of the first Christian leaders to endorse Donald Trump. But then Wagner comes along in his wake and says, yeah, and these seven mountains, like Donald Trump has already conquered the media mountain. He's already conquered the business mountain. What if we could have him conquer the government mountain for us? Right? So this becomes part of that rationale for the political theology that undergirds Trumpism. Now, you asked about the Bible. So people have tried to read this into the Bible, and there are references to 7 hills in Revelation that people have tried to say are somehow but the 7 hills of Revelation are just literally the 7 hills of the city of Rome, right? It's not this like deeply coded image. It's literally a reference to Rome. But the people have tried to read it into the Bible in different ways, but really the roots of it, the imagery, the ideas, come more out of this kind of Calvinist theology and then these prophecies that these folks are very fixated on.